Now, what I want you to understand is this. Simply choosing a font is not typography. Anyone can choose a font, okay? You can go to dafont.com or any number of free font websites. There's 8 million of them. That's easy. But not everyone knows how to treat text as visual design. That means you're purposefully utilizing size, weight, space, and style combinations to establish visual order, to signal relationships, to enhance understanding. Simply choosing a font does not automatically do any of those things. So typography is not about choosing fonts. It's about purposefully combining letter forms to create an optimal reading experience, which also delivers appropriate emotional impact. Remember the examples I showed you before and how you hear those things. That is part of the job of good typography. Now that has a hell of a lot to do with pattern recognition. And here's what pattern recognition is. When we see the letter H, we recognize it. We know what that is. We've seen it 100 times before. We understand that those two vertical lines crossed by a horizontal line, at least in the English alphabet, that's an H. If we abstract it a little bit with a different typeface, we still recognize it. Why? Because the pattern is largely intact. The more we start to abstract the pattern, the harder it is to recognize the shape. Okay, this is why font choices aren't necessarily typography. Because we can choose a font that's visually interesting, but the more abstracted the pattern gets, the harder it is for us to understand and recognize what we're seeing. So here's a full sentence. This is Proxima Nova. It's a sans serif font. It's very readable. Common patterns, right? The H's look like common H's, E, R, E, right? We get it. We've seen this 100 times before. No problem. We can read this quickly. Now, same sentence in a slightly different font. Patterns are a little bit abstracted. There's a small lag in cognitive time to understand that. Here it is again. Takes a little more effort to read because of the weird ascenders and descenders on some of these letters. Also, the gaps between some of those letters is wildly inconsistent. The gaps between words is inconsistent. You're going to see that later, but I call it out because a lot of fonts that are created are done by folks who really haven't given any thought to how consistent the spaces between letters and words needs to be. And I'll harp on that some more later, but I just wanted to call it to your attention. We abstract it further. You see the difference? You see what's happening here? It's a little harder to read and look at. And when we get to this point, there's a lot of work the brain has to do. Even if you can read it, even if you can figure out what it says, your brain has to do a lot more work. This is the importance of choosing the right typeface, especially in situations where people are spending a lot of time on the screen. That clarity and maintaining that pattern recognition is extremely important.